Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being awake and coming. It's great. Today we're going to do chapter 15, which is trace minerals, and we're going to make it through the whole chapter today, so brace yourself. But for starters, I wanted to go back and talk about the in-class assignment that I gave you last time. So I had asked you to draw a picture. Use your artistic abilities if you can. And you were supposed to include parathyroid hormone, osteoclast, osteoblast, calcium, as well as bone and a blood vessel to describe how, when you have low blood calcium, that parathyroid hormone affects this. So I'm just going to take you through what you should have drawn. So here's my blood vessel, because I'm not artistic either, so just a box that says blood calcium in it. When you have low blood calcium, this actually signals to the parathyroid glands that are on your thyroid. So you have your thyroid here, and those yellow circles are your parathyroid glands. And the low blood calcium tells your parathyroid glands to secrete parathyroid hormone. So parathyroid hormone does a couple things. What I asked you to describe was its role against on osteoblasts and osteoclasts. So it actually inhibits osteoblasts from forming more bone, because if you have low blood calcium, you don't want that calcium to be mineralized to the bone, because it would decrease more. So you stop osteoblast activity, and you increase osteoclast activity. So osteoclasts actually remove calcium from the trabecular bone. That's the bone on the inside that is more of a spongy texture to it. And this causes the release of free calcium that's going to restore your blood calcium levels. So if you drew anything similar to this, congratulations. If not, I hope you learned. Parathyroid hormone has a couple other effects too. It goes to your kidneys and tells your kidneys to reduce the secretion of calcium, so you're going to retain more of it. And it also synthesizes the active, or tells your kidneys to synthesize the active form of vitamin D, which is going to help you absorb more in your diet. So I know I only asked you to discuss its role on bone itself, but I'm just saying parathyroid hormone has many lines of defense to maintain your blood calcium levels. Okay, so we're going to dive into trace minerals today. The first one we're going to talk about is iron. So iron comes in two forms in your food. You have heme iron, which I'm sure most of you have heard before. This is the iron that's associated with myoglobin and hemoglobin. So it's found primarily, or it's found only in meat and seafood. And then all the other iron that you get from like plant and grain sources is called non-heme iron. So the necessary, or the RDA for women is about 18 milligrams per day, and for men it's only 8 milligrams per day. But for women, after we go through menopause, it drops back down to 8 milligrams per day. And can anybody tell me why that is? Yeah. Right, so her answer was you no longer are menstruating. So as a woman, you go through a cycle every month and you menstruate and you lose a lot of iron. That's why your adequate, or your RDA, is 18 milligrams while a man's is only 8. That's 10 milligrams more. That's more than twice as much. That's a lot. And ironically, women eat a lot less red meat and foods that have bioavailable iron, so our risks for iron deficiency are a lot higher than for men. So on average, the U.S. does a pretty good job. We intake between 12 and 17 milligrams a day. So iron absorption. Iron gets taken up by your enterocyte from the apical side, so the brush border there, either as heme or as free ferrous. Ferrous is the 2+ state. Ferrous iron. So you can only absorb iron if it's in its ferrous state. So there's an enzyme here on the brush border called ferric reductase enzyme. So this is going to turn the 3+ iron, or ferric iron, into ferrous iron so that your body can absorb it. Once it's absorbed, it is bound to a protein in the enterocyte called ferritin. So the amount of ferritin actually correlates to your iron status, because ferritin is the protein that binds iron in all your other tissues as well. So if you have high ferritin levels, it's a marker that you actually have high iron status. So I mentioned before that iron absorption is affected by polyphenols. So I talked about EGCG, the polyphenol that's in green tea. There's a lot of other polyphenols, but I'm just going to use that one as an example. So if that polyphenol gets absorbed into the same enterocyte, it can bind that iron and prevent it from getting absorbed through the basolateral side of the cell. And when this cell is shed or sloughed off, as we know, enterocytes in our intestine are always changing out, that iron's going to be lost. So once iron leaves the enterocyte and gets absorbed through this ferroportin protein and enters your blood system, it is bound to a transport protein called transferrin. And transferrin is important for transporting iron to all the other tissues in your body. So your muscle, into your red blood cells, liver, where it's going to be stored or utilized. Okay, so some things that affect iron absorption. So iron you have increased absorption, if there is a high demand for iron. So if you have low iron status, or if you're in high altitude, or you're starting to train for a marathon, your body's going to be like, whoa, we need more iron. Let's really focus on absorbing more of it, which is kind of a fun thing that your body can do. It also, as I mentioned before, has a better absorption rate if it's taken with vitamin C. So I told you if you're looking for a supplement for iron, then make sure that there's vitamin C in the label, because it's going to increase the absorption of that supplement. And then gastric acidity. So the more acidic a stomach you have, the better chance you're going to absorb that iron. So take the supplement with food, or just eat food that has iron in it. So, but factors that are going to decrease is if you have a low need for iron. So let's say you're already at capacity for storage of iron, and you eat a big bolus, or you eat one of those supplements, your body's not going to absorb as much as if you were in a normal iron status or a low one. And then things like phytic acid or oxalic acid, which we talked about in the bioavailability section, can bind iron and inhibit its absorption, as well as polyphenols, which I just talked about. And yeah. So what does iron do for us? Most of you know that iron is involved in oxygen transportation. So the same way that hemoglobin in our blood binds iron, or has iron in it, which binds oxygen and then distributes that oxygen to all of our cells. On top of that, you have myoglobin, which binds oxygen in your muscle to do the same thing. And then there's also key enzymes that contain iron that are important for metabolism. So parts of the electron transport chain, or the citric acid cycle. So here the citrate to isocitrate, there is an iron-containing enzyme that is important for that conversion. Exciting stuff, right? So, iron deficiency. Iron is actually the most common mineral deficiency in the entire world. So it causes anemia, which I'm sure you guys have heard before. So anemia is depicted here. These are normal red blood cells, okay? There's a lot of them. They're bright in color, and they're a pretty nice size. When you're anemic, you have fewer red blood cells. You have smaller red blood cells, and they're kind of a paler color. So they don't have enough of that heme iron that is necessary to carry oxygen. So people with anemia tend to be really tired. At risk are premature infants, children, and then, as we talked about before, women, because we lose a lot of iron every month through menstruation. And then as well as vegetarians, because they aren't getting that rich heme iron source from meat. So when I learned about anemia, my professor told me about his wife. And when they were in college together, just started dating, he used to invite her over for coffee all the time. And she loved coffee. So she would sit down and have like 8 cups of coffee and immediately fall asleep. And he's like, God, that is so weird. I don't know anyone else that isn't affected by caffeine like this woman is, but I love coffee too, so maybe this is the one. Turns out she was severely anemic, like severely anemic. So if you're tired all the time, consider maybe getting your iron tested. Yeah?
Doesn't caffeine also decrease absorption of iron?
It can. Caffeine, I've heard it decreases the absorption of calcium, but I'm assuming if it decreases the absorption of calcium, it probably has an effect on other minerals of a similar charge, like iron. But that is only if you're consuming them around the same time. So if you're eating meat or you take an iron supplement and drink coffee at the same time, you could decrease the absorption of it, yes. Yeah.
So for vegetarians, how do they make up that extra iron?
Right.
Or is it?
So the question is, how do vegetarians get the amount of iron that they need? Well, it could be through supplements. There is iron in a lot of plant-based foods, but it isn't absorbed as readily. So most people that are vegetarians are encouraged to take an iron supplement. So if you are vegetarian, I would recommend it. I'm vegetarian and I take an iron supplement. So, yep.
If you are anemic, then do you disregard the upper limit to become not anemic? Or when you have something, do you still stay under the upper limit to restore?
Right. Okay. So the answer is, if you are anemic, do you exceed the upper limit to compensate for it and restore your iron stores, kind of thing. So the upper limit here is 45 milligrams per day. And I told you for women, the intake is about 18 milligrams. So I would never recommend someone going up to 45 milligrams, even if they were anemic. I mean, I'm not a physician, but 18 is a lot less than that. So I could foresee maybe them saying consume about 25 milligrams per day, but I would never go as high as the upper limit, because you still have that risk of over-consuming iron and that toxicity. Any other questions? Cool. So let's talk about iron toxicity. So as I just stated, the upper limit is 45 milligrams per day. And what happens is you have excess iron being stored in tissues it usually doesn't get stored in. So, it gets stored in a lot of tissues, but you get excess storage. So you can actually get liver disease and heart failure because you're storing too much iron in those organs. This is most likely due to excess supplementation. So if you are going to take a supplement every day, be very conscious about how many milligrams it says is in it, okay? Because if you're taking one that is like super dose, 65 milligrams, which a lot of them are, you don't want to be taking that every day, and you might actually want to cut it in half. I take one that's like 15 milligrams, which is below what I need, so that if I get some from food, I won't be getting too much, because there is risk involved in that. And then there's a genetic disorder called hemochromatosis, where you actually absorb way too much iron. So I told you before that something that decreases iron absorption is if you're already at a good iron status. So your body's like, hey, I don't need it. I'm not going to absorb that. Hemochromatosis, you don't do that. You continue to absorb excessive amounts of iron. You absorb it better than you normally would. And this can lead to toxicity, like we said before, where it builds up in your liver and you get liver disease. It builds up in your heart, and you could have heart failure. But another interesting fact is that it can build up in your pancreas and actually kill your beta cells so that you get diabetes. This is known as bronze diabetes, primarily because your skin turns kind of a bronze color because you're storing so much iron everywhere, but also because your pancreas turns bronze. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Any questions about iron before we move on? Or any more questions, I suppose? No? Okay, so we're going to talk about zinc next. Zinc is also found in protein-rich foods like meat and seafood. And so we get about 70% of our zinc from these sources, from meat and seafood. So zinc is bound to a carrier protein called metallothionein, which took me a very long time to figure out how to pronounce that word. But it's very similar to how iron gets bound to ferritin in your enterocytes. So it facilitates absorption, pretty much. But unlike iron, you don't store zinc. You don't store it in your body anywhere because it can be easily secreted. Thus, there's really no risk, or there's a very low risk for toxicity because your body just gets rid of excess. So factors that influence zinc absorption. So it's funny, most of these are related to having low zinc status. So low or moderate zinc intake, zinc deficiency, or if you have an increased need of zinc. All those are really just saying that you don't have enough zinc. And when you don't have enough zinc, your body's like, hey, we should really focus on absorbing more. So they're going to absorb more, or it's going to absorb more. And then things that can decrease your absorption. Again, these fiber, phytic acid that we talked about in the bioavailability, found in plants or whole grains. If you have excessive zinc intake, which we'll see in a little bit is due usually to zinc supplements or those zinc lozenges. And then if you're already at good zinc status, your body's not going to waste energy trying to absorb more of it. So what does zinc do? Zinc does a whole heck of a lot. It's involved in at least 300 different enzyme reactions that include DNA and RNA synthesis, heme synthesis, as well as your taste, your ability to taste food, immune function, and importantly, reproduction and growth. So deficiency is pretty prevalent in impoverished countries. As North Americans, we have very marginal deficiency, so we're not going to really see a lot of symptoms. But if you do have severe zinc deficiency, a lot goes wrong. One in particular, very common sign of a zinc deficiency is impaired growth and going through puberty. So if a child has a zinc deficiency, they won't grow and they won't go through puberty. So a picture of this, this is an Egyptian boy, and he is 16 years old, but he had a severe zinc deficiency, So he never went through puberty and never got taller. So, I mean, to me, he looks like he's probably about 8 or so, but he's 16 years old. So the upper limit is 40 milligrams per day, and as I said before, that is mostly due to supplementation or these throat lozenges. Okay. So we're going to do a question of the day that actually was from last year, but it relates to zinc, so I think it's important. I work as a Walgreens associate, and a sniffly, red-nosed customer got very angry at us when we were out of zinc lozenges. So it got me thinking, why is it that zinc is recommended when you start feeling like you may have caught a cold? Does it actually help by lowering the duration of the cold, unlike vitamin C? Should it be viewed more as a preventative care? So has anybody heard this before, that zinc is good for fighting a common cold? Yeah? Did you have a question? Oh, cool. Okay. Yeah, so zinc actually has more of an effect against the cold than vitamin C does. So if you supplement zinc within the first 24 hours of your cold symptoms, it can actually reduce the duration and severity of your cold. If you supplement it long term, so if you're taking zinc supplements or having a lozenge like every other day, it actually can prevent you from getting the common cold. So the zinc form, as we talked about in other supplements, might be important, but no one fully understands that. And unlike vitamin C, zinc can actually reduce the duration, as I said before. So vitamin C doesn't really do as much as we once hoped. When vitamin C first got discovered, people thought it was going to cure cancer, which is the truth about any vitamin. They get really excited about it, and then everybody's like, oh, man. So emergency or airborne or all those other high-dose vitamin Cs aren't really doing much for you. So my recommendation would be to focus on zinc because it is going to help with your cold. But don't overdo it. Okay, so let's talk about copper a little bit. Copper is found in liver, shellfish, nuts, seeds, mushrooms, soy, and dark chocolate, which is another good source of dark chocolate, or another good quality of dark chocolate, if you guys remember that last question of the day. You only need about 900 micrograms, so micrograms, it's very small. And we tend to get that or exceed it, so 1,000 to 1,600 micrograms a day. So copper isn't really a concern in the United States as far as deficiencies go. You don't really store much of it, and it is excreted mostly in bile. And absorption is largely controlled by copper balance. So if you have excess copper, you're not going to absorb all of it, kind of like how your body regulates. If it's in a low status, it's going to absorb more. If it's in a high status, it's going to absorb less. So what does copper do? Copper is part of your antioxidant defense. So superoxide dismutase enzyme. That is present at the electron transport chain and reduces free radicals that would otherwise cause oxidative damage. It's important for neurotransmitters and as well as connective tissue. So as I said, since we have very good intake, deficiency is very rare, but if you do have deficiency, you have anemic type symptoms similar to iron deficiency, and you have a suppressed immune function. So the upper limit would be 10 milligrams per day. So 10 milligrams. You only need 900 micrograms. That's a drastic difference, so pretty hard to get that. The cool thing, though, is, well, I think it's cool. If you do have a copper toxicity, the way that people can tell is you actually get copper buildup in your eyeball. So it's called Wilson's disease, and this person's eye is blue, okay? But all of these gold-colored rings around it is copper deposits because they have copper toxicity. So that's the way that people can tell if you've overconsumed. It's very uncommon, but it's pretty. Yeah?
So if I want gold eyeballs...
Don't do that. Yeah, just get a colored contact lens or something. I mean, yeah, I'm not trying to advocate that you should overconsume copper to be pretty. Please don't do that. Okay, so we're going to move on to manganese. Manganese is found in a lot of cereal and grains, and nuts, legumes, tea. So manganese, kind of like copper, is controlled by its secretion in bile. So if you have too much of it, your body's going to be like, I'll secrete more in bile. And only about 10% of the manganese you consume is absorbed, which is pretty low. So what does manganese do? It's very similar to what zinc and copper do. It's involved in a lot of enzymatic reactions. Deficiency is very rare, but the upper limit is 11 milligrams a day. And yeah, it's kind of boring. So that's all we're going to talk about with manganese. Sorry. So iodine. Iodine is the other trace mineral that I enjoy. So iodine comes primarily from the sea. So things that come from salt water, so fish or seaweed. We also get it from iodized salt as well as molasses and dairy products. I should just show there. So there are compounds called goitrogens that are found in some raw vegetables that decrease iodine's bioavailability. So if you're salting raw vegetables that have goitrogens in them and eat it, you're not going to be salting with iodized salt, sorry. You're not going to be consuming as much iodine as you would because it's going to bind that iodine and prevent its absorption. So does anybody know why they're called goitrogens? No? Okay. When you have an iodine deficiency, you get goiter, right? That's the disease, so goitrogens, goiter, kind of makes sense. So needs. You need about 150 micrograms per day, and we are above that. Our average intake is usually between 200 and 300 micrograms, which is pretty good. Yes? We're going to get there. Next slide. Yeah, that's funny. I thought most people knew what that was. Anyway, okay. So where is iodine used? Iodine is stored in your thyroid gland and is very important for thyroid hormone. So this molecule up here is your thyroid hormone, and you can see there's an iodine, 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 and iodine. So you have two different thyroid hormones. There's thyroxine, and there's triiodothyronine, which I can never say fully. But these are very, 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 very important for energy metabolism. So if you have an iodine deficiency, you can get something called goiter. So what happens is your thyroid actually enlarges in an attempt to sequester more iodine that's in your body. So it's trying to scavenge out iodine by getting bigger. I don't have a picture for you of this, but if you've ever seen in like third world countries or villages that the women or the men can have these giant throats. Seriously? No one? You guys don't know I got one nod. Really? Okay. Well, anyway, this part of your throat gets a lot bigger because that's where your thyroid is, right? So it's really just trying to get as much iodine as possible, and it can get really, like, significantly large, terrifyingly large. So another disorder is called cretinism, which happens when you have an iodine deficiency in utero. So in utero, iodine deficiency causes mental retardation. You have restricted growth, and you have health problems kind of throughout your life. So deficiency is still prominent in many countries. And these diseases are endemic, which means that they're confined to an area. So I told you that iodine comes primarily from the sea. So if you live close to the sea and you have access to fresh fish, fresh seaweed, products of the sea, you don't have an issue. So actually, back in the 1920s, there was something called the goiter belt in the United States, which was predominantly the Great Lakes area and the northwestern part of the country, because it was excluded from the ocean, and people were getting severe iodine deficiencies and getting goiters. So in 1924, the U.S. government said, hey, we could fix this. What's something that everybody eats often? And they're like, you know what, table salt. People are always salting their food. So if we add iodine to table salt, we'll solve this problem. And that's exactly what they did. And that's why none of you know what a goiter is. So that's pretty great. So table salt, if you ever noticed, it says iodized salt on it because they're trying to protect you from an iodine deficiency. And that's why our intake is so adequate. But if anybody remembers, maybe 3 years ago, roughly, people got really into the craze of sea salt. So natural salt from the sea. Okay, and I told you that iodine comes from the sea, so if you're eating sea salt, you think, hey, well, there should be iodine in it if it's natural. But no. The salt purification process from salt water actually crystallizes it away from everything else that is in that salt water. So sea salt has very little iodine in it, and people thought, I want to be healthy. I'm going to eat sea salt. That's the craze. People are telling me that sea salt is not the same as other salts. It's better for you. I'm going to eat more of it. And because of that, we started seeing more thyroid issues, which is terrifying because that's something we eradicated in 1924. Yeah?
So if you get a goiter, can you like get rid of it by just increasing your consumption of water? Or how does that work?
I don't actually know that. Doug, do you have any idea? Does it shrink back down? I guess it depends on the severity of it. Like if you have had an iodine deficiency for so long that it's like another head, which I'm not joking, it can get very large. I don't think it would shrink down to what it once was. But at least your energy metabolism would be restored and you'd be healthy again. So anyway, they started seeing this issue and urged sea salt manufacturers to start putting iodine back into their salts. So it's still sea salt, so you can feel good about it, but you're getting now your iodine that you need. Okay, so the upper limit is 100 micrograms, and toxicity is usually due to excess iodine intake or if you have hypothyroidism. Okay, so we're going to move on to another question of the day. This one's quite interesting. So the website stylecraze.com should be a giveaway to me that this is not legitimate, but I was just wondering if you knew anything about this milk variation and its possible benefits. Okay, so you're probably all like, what milk variation? So I was going to go to the website, but there's a couple advertisements when you scroll down that I deemed inappropriate. So I just took a screenshot of the top of it, and the milk variation that they're talking about is the addition of turmeric to milk. So you boil turmeric stalks or stems in milk, and then you drink it. So the 16 health benefits they're talking about in this are on the side here. That's a lot, right? It makes you think that turmeric is going to solve every problem you could ever have. Or at least turmeric milk. So this is a kind of an ancient Indian remedy. So there's a postdoc in Dr. Mashik's lab that I work with who is from India, and I just offhand asked him about this, and he was like, oh yeah, when I was younger and I had a cold, my grandmother used to make me turmeric milk. And I was like, oh, so that's pretty cool. He's like, I don't know if it does anything. I'm like, great, that helps me a lot. So it's kind of like when we got sick, your mom used to make you Campbell's chicken noodle soup or something. So it's traditional. But I was curious if any of this held true in scientific literature. So I dove into PubMed and found out that turmeric, the active component, is called curcumin. And there have been a lot of human clinical trials giving curcumin to see if it has any health benefit. And the ones that I found health benefits for are the 4 that I've highlighted here. So cancer, it has an anti-inflammatory effect. It protected or treated symptoms of arthritis and digestive health. So curcumin has an impact on inflammation. So things like cancer and arthritis, and when I say digestion, it was focused primarily on irritable bowel syndrome. So that's an inflammatory digestive health problem. And curcumin has an anti-inflammatory effect. Okay, it kind of reduces inflammatory cytokines that cause a lot of symptoms within these diseases. And the effects were quite impressive. Anti-proliferative effects in cancer. It reduced swelling and joint pain and arthritis, and it cured a lot of abdominal pain in IBS or irritable bowel syndrome. But there's kind of a catch with this. So curcumin is only about 2 to 3% of turmeric. So if you're eating turmeric, only 2% of it is going to be curcumin. And in these studies, they were using between 400 milligrams and 10 grams of curcumin supplementation a day. That's a lot, right? So let's say that you're really interested in getting this effect, okay? Like you have upset stomach all the time, or you think you have arthritis at a way too young an age. And you want to consume enough curcumin to see an anti-inflammatory effect. Let's go with 400 milligrams. So 400 milligrams of curcumin. If turmeric is only 2% curcumin, that means that you have to consume 20 grams of turmeric a day to get the amount of curcumin that showed an effect in all these studies. So that would be like eating a third of this jar every day. That's a lot of turmeric. That's a lot of turmeric. This is kind of similar. You might not have known this, but for a while people were really hyped up about red wine and resveratrol, the antioxidant in red wine. And there's all these studies that came out that was like resveratrol is going to cure cancer and promote longevity, and it's the best thing in the world. And then you go to those studies and you look at the dose of resveratrol they're giving people, and it is astronomically higher than what you would get from drinking a glass of red wine a day. So I'm not telling you that consuming turmeric is a bad thing. I mean, obviously it has some health benefits, but it's not physiological. It's not something that you can really expect a lot of people to do. Yeah.
With consuming turmeric, say like in spices and cultures, when consuming it in smaller doses, like pretty much regularly every day for years, for basically your whole life, if that's part of your culture, would that show some of these same effects?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think people have really dove into that too much, because you think about Indian culture. Question. So what she asked was, if you consumed smaller doses of turmeric on a daily basis over years of your life because it's part of your culture, would that have a health benefit? Would you see any of these effects because of it? And so you kind of, to figure that out, you have to look at populations that do consume it on a daily basis and compare the risk or the rate of certain diseases with other populations that don't. So in America, we don't use a lot of turmeric in cooking, right? Or in a lot of European countries, but India definitely uses a lot of turmeric. So if you take those two populations, and I don't know if there's been a study that does this, and just look at, okay, hey, by epidemiologically, these people consume more turmeric, and they're at less of a risk for this disease, this disease, this disease. That is an indicator. I don't personally know. I'm sure someone's interested in that, but potentially would be my answer. Okay, and as far as the milk part goes, I don't think it's any different than adding turmeric to like a stir fry that you're making or a curry that you're making. I think it's just a carrier for it, so that's why they focus on the turmeric in the milk. Okay, yep.
Going back to the slide before, they said like the toxicity of iodine causes hypothyroidism. Hypothyroidism reduces your metabolism and energy. Is it because the increase in iodine that you're taking would slow the absorption of the iodine?
Yeah, so iodine's kind of tricky because if you have too little, you produce less thyroid hormones, and if you have too much, you actually produce less thyroidism or thyroid hormones. So it's really like a balance. Yeah, does that make sense? Okay, so selenium. I think we only have 2 minerals left, so stick with me, guys. Selenium is also found in seafood and meats, but then cereal grains and nuts, and is really dependent on the soil selenium status. So if you're growing grain, like cereal grain, like wheat, okay, in soil that's rich in selenium, your wheat is going to be rich in selenium. If you're growing it in soil that's been depleted of selenium because you've rotated out too many crops or something, it's going to have a lower selenium content. So it's readily absorbed, and it's primarily controlled through urinary excretion. So like the other minerals we just talked about, it's involved in enzymatic activities, and one of which is important for antioxidant defense. So glutathione peroxidase. So glutathione peroxidase is a selenium-containing enzyme that converts peroxides into alcohols and water that are more easily metabolized. So peroxides are considered reactive oxygen species, which means that they can form other reactive oxygen species and they can cause damage to your cells. So if you have adequate selenium, you have adequate activity of your glutathione peroxidase that protects you from these. It's also important for for sparing vitamin E. So vitamin E is the other important antioxidant defense in your body. Vitamin E can take free radicals and stabilize them. But if you are trying to conserve vitamin E because you don't have a high vitamin E status, then it's important to have glutathione peroxidase. So there's no reported deficiency symptoms, but the upper limit is 400 micrograms and can potentially cause toxicity. Okay, so fluoride. Fluoride is our last mineral. What is fluoride important for? Your teeth, right? So fluoride is, you primarily get your fluoride from fluoridated water, which is something that your government also did for you, so you don't have to worry about consuming it. But it also can be consumed in seafood as well as seaweed. So adequate intake for a woman is about 3 milligrams, and for a man is about 4 milligrams. And it's absorbed quite readily and is stored, in your bones and in your teeth. So it promotes bone and dental health. The upper limit is 10 milligrams, which is a lot. And if you have a deficiency, it causes cavities or tooth decay. So I dabbled with the idea of putting a really disgusting picture of someone's teeth decaying, but it made me so physically sick that I thought I won't do that to you guys, especially since it's not even 9 o'clock yet. So, but you can imagine, it's pretty gross. Don't Google it. But fluoridation. So this map just depicts the percent of water that is fluoridated. So any blue state, about 75% to 100 of their water has fluoride in it. And then the only state that has really been resistant to this apparently is New Jersey, right? And I think they get a lot of heat about that. I just Googled it a little bit, and there's all these forums about like, put fluoride in our water. Why are you doing this to us? And it made me think of, does anybody watch Parks and Rec? When they're trying to add fluoride to the water, and people are terrified that's a chemical. It's not. It's a mineral that you need. And they had to put a spin on it like it's sparkle water. I forgot what Tom Haverford did, who's not a real person, but that's okay. Anyway, so the point is most of the country puts fluoride in its water, and because of that, you guys don't have disgusting, decaying teeth. Yes?
So you know those like water bottle filters, do those filter out fluoride?
Fluoride.
Like, you know, like the...
Like a Brita or something that you attach to your tap?
The water fountains?
Oh, at the top. Oh, the filtered
Where you put your
water.
water bottle and it's like filtered water.
Right.
And it's giving you, is that filtering out like fluoride and stuff like that?
I don't know. I actually don't. So the question was, does filters in like drinking fountains or on your water bottle or your Brita at home, does that filter out fluoride? Dr. Moshik, do you have any idea? Pollutants? Okay. So, yeah, you know you have like hard and soft water. There's actually minerals in your water. I think filter water, you still have those. It's only when you purify water by like boiling it and condensing it again that you get it away from minerals. So if you do drink bottled water that says it's purified, you're not getting those minerals, which would be fluoride might be one of them. So, yeah.
Those toothpastes that have like added fluoride, does that actually get like absorbed and benefit you, or is it?
Yeah, so you probably swallow a little bit more of that toothpaste than you think you do. So yeah, that's why they do it. It's for healthy teeth. It's not just a gimmick. Yeah.
I'm just confused because I work at a baby store, so I know like if some people come in, they're like, oh, my kid can't have fluoride, and so I saw it said like kids are sensitive to it on like the previous slide.
Yeah.
Like
More
what,
sensitive to levels.
what makes adults like?
Less sensitive.
Yeah.
I really think it's just size, right?
Okay.
So when you're an infant, you have, or a child. Sorry, I'm not getting reverb. Sorry, the question was why children or infants are more sensitive to the levels of fluoride. I really think it's just because they're smaller. They have less bone to store the fluoride in. So they probably need less, which means if they have more, it's potentially dangerous. Okay, and then there's a couple ultra trace minerals that we're not going to get into extensively, or maybe at all. Yeah. Does anybody, I don't think I'm going to go over those at all. So we're going to dive into cancer. This is at the end of your chapter, and it's kind of a pressing matter. I know most of us at least know someone who has cancer, so I thought we'd discuss a little bit about how cancer forms and what factors influence cancer development and what we can do as a society. So, cancer is the second leading cause of death in the United States. That's pretty prevalent. But it's not necessarily a single disease. So cancer is defined as uncontrolled proliferation of altered cells. Okay? But cancer in your skin and cancer in your esophagus and cancer in your colon or uterus or cervix or anything, all are different. They all metabolize differently. They all form for different reasons. And even within that area, like colon cancer is colon cancer is colon cancer, that's not true as all. So either. So using the term cancer as an overarching disease isn't really true because they all form and grow and are treated very, very differently. So how does cancer form? What happens is you have a cell that experiences some sort of DNA alteration. So it could be damage from UV light. It could be chemical, like if you have too much reactive oxygen species and it damages your DNA. And when that happens, you have altered DNA that causes that cell to kind of become rogue. It decides, hey, I'm not going to function the way that I normally do, which means that you have a few replications now and then when your body tells you to, but other than that, you're in kind of a non-proliferative state. So this DNA alteration causes the cell to increase its division and start to replicate. So somewhere around this state, so you have initiation where you have DNA alteration, and then you have increased cell division. This is still a time when your cell can recognize this as a foreign body. So your immune system is important for saying this virus or this bacteria is not a part of me, and if it's not a part of me, then I should destroy it. Okay, that's how your immune system keeps you healthy. So when you have one cell that has altered DNA, or you have a couple cells because it started to divide, this is still a state when your immune system could be like, I don't know about that guy over there, maybe he's not good, and can stop it. And this happens more often than you might think, but you don't know about it. You don't know about it because it's never diagnosed, you never have symptoms, no one told you that you had cancer, and you really don't have cancer because your body was like, I got this. Your immune system took care of it. So that's what we want to happen. So maintaining a healthy immune system is really key to preventing cancer, right? So if that doesn't happen, you can get a tumor formation. So the cells continue to divide, and they form a mass called a tumor. So that tumor can either be benign or malignant. So benign means it's non-cancerous. And the reason it's non-cancerous is because it's surrounded by a membrane that kind of traps it. It keeps it where it is. So a surgeon or a doctor can go in and say, hey, we're just going to cut that out, and you'll be fine again, because there's no risk of those cancer cells leaving that area. Malignant, on the other hand, means it's cancerous, and it can spread. So when a tumor spreads, it's called metastasis. So it metastasizes. So here's a tumor, and these cancer cells have broken into your bloodstream and are now traveling to another part of your body. So what once was skin cancer can become liver cancer or any other cancer you can think of, prostate cancer. So yeah. Does anybody have any questions about that so far? Yeah.
So if you have cancer of an organ, so like you have lung cancer, is it necessarily that the cells there are lung cells, or is it just that they're cancerous cells?
So they still, the question is if you have lung cancer, is it that those cancer cells that are there are still lung cells, or are they just cancer cells? So a lung cell is defined by the genes that it expresses and its rate of proliferation and all the things that make a lung cell a lung cell. So once any cell becomes cancerous, it's no longer a cell of that tissue. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple environmental and dietary factors, as well as genetic, that can cause your increased risk for cancer. So first off, having a low intake of fruit and vegetables. I know you've probably heard this since you were an infant, but to eat your fruits and vegetables. And still, Americans tend to avoid green or colorful things because there's too many other tasty foods out there. Another risk factor is excess energy intake. So being obese or consuming way more calories than you need to on a daily basis. So when you consume food, it tells your body, hey, we have a lot of nutrients here. We should grow. We should divide. We should store. So you consume Pop-Tart or something, and you get an insulin response. And that insulin tells your body, we could proliferate. We have enough supplies to make more cells. So people, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but children that are obese or kids that are like 13 that are overweight tend to look older than they are. Has anybody noticed that? So the reason for that is because consuming a lot of nutrients tells your body that you can go ahead and grow. And it actually speeds up the aging process. So if you think about that from a cancer perspective, consuming excess nutrients, telling your body it can proliferate, is almost promoting rogue cells to proliferate uncontrollably. So I'm not going to get into the metabolic signaling pathways of it, but there's a lot of research that has suggested cancer cells can be propagated from over-consuming food, from telling your body to proliferate. Another one is having a sedentary lifestyle. So exercise does a world of wonders for our body. It's not just a means to lose weight. So if you are a thin individual, exercise is still a huge benefit for you. It's a stress to your body. You're putting your body under physical stress. And any physical stress your body's under prepares it for other physical stresses. So a good example of this is, does anybody know the purpose of yoga? It's kind of off topic, but not really. Sorry, so he said being flexible. That's part of it. But really what yoga does is puts your body in the most weird, uncomfortable, awkward positions so that you can breathe through the stress of it. You know how they say yoga is all about breath? It's really trying to teach your body that under stressful conditions, you can maintain composure. So people that do yoga tend to respond more peacefully to other stresses in their life, right? So if you're exercising, you're teaching your body how to respond to stress. So let's say that you have a stressor, like a rogue, oh, it's not up there anymore, a rogue cancer cell. Your body's going to have a better defense against that. Okay, so high intakes of red meat. I don't know if you guys saw this, but the World Health Organization finally came out with a verdict on processed meats. And they said that processed meats contain carcinogens that promote cancer. Yes?
So is that only including processed meat, or is that red meat
I was under the impression it was more processed meats.
Okay.
So anything that has gone through like sausage or bacon or hot dogs or things that have had extensive processing to them. If you get a slab of red meat, I don't think it is as much of a health risk. There are a lot of health risks correlated with red meat, but it's more like the nitrates and the nitrites that are added to it that alter some of the chemicals that make carcinogens. Okay, another one is fried foods. So you guys know, like, you deep fry a beer battered piece of fish or something and it gets that nice golden brown color? You know that? Like the French fries that are golden brown. That color is actually a chemical called acrylamide. And acrylamide is a carcinogen. And for years, the food industry has known this. I mean, I was taught this in undergrad when I was in food science, but they figure it's uncontrollable. It's going to be produced in this chemical reaction anyway, and it's such a low amount that we're not going to worry about it. Okay? But for a population that loves fried food and eats a lot of fried food, I mean, if you've been to the state fair, it's kind of a problem. It's not only fried foods. You know, baked goods, like if you have muffins or breads or it gets that golden color on top, cookies, that is also acrylamide. And acrylamide is a carcinogen. So I'm not like trying to scare you and say like, avoid red meat, avoid baked goods, but it is a balance, right? So consuming a little bit of a carcinogen isn't going to kill you. It's not going to give you cancer. It's exposure over years that's the issue. And if anything, I mean, small doses of it people think are good. If you expose yourself to small doses of things that are bad for you, it keeps your immune system sharp. It keeps your body active. It's kind of like Clark Kent and Kryptonite. Yeah, I got a nod. I'm right. I know stuff. Okay. So anyway, and then another one is alcohol. So we all know the risks of alcohol. Excessive alcohol consumption can especially lead to esophageal cancer, colon cancer, liver cancer. Liver cancer because your liver is what processes alcohol. And when it does that a lot, it gets really fatty. And when it gets really fatty, it gets scarry. Scarry's not a word. It scars, and then you can get liver cirrhosis and ultimately hepatocellular carcinoma. So you've heard of alcoholic liver disease? Alcoholic fatty liver disease? Yep. Okay. Okay, so low intake of vitamin D and calcium. I don't really have much to say about that one. And then tobacco, which is one that you guys have known probably your entire lives because the war against tobacco started when you were maybe in high school. I don't know. So anyway, tobacco for a while was a leading cause of cancer, as you know, lung cancer. But now it's less and less prevalent as people realize the health risks involved in it. In our country, at least. The tobacco companies here, when people started throwing stones at them, went abroad and started selling cigarettes where people would buy them. So at least in the United States, we have decreasing use of tobacco and therefore decreased risk for cancer. So, I mean, you look at this list, and to me, it just screams, you know, America. And I know that sounds terrible, but we're in a society that says, here's this oversized car, drive it to work every day, sit in this cubicle all day and don't get up. You know, let's make treats and bring them in. Let's eat out because it's more convenient and cost effective actually than making food. You know, everything that is on the shelves is processed and tasty and easy. So when I go grocery shopping, I don't know if you guys have heard this before, I do the U. So I go through the produce. I walk past all the aisles that have the, pardon my French, but crap in it. I go to the frozen section, the dairy section, and then I leave. Because everything in the middle is unnecessary. It's things you don't need. It's temptation. So the best way to avoid temptation is to just literally avoid it. You know, just walk around it. So a lot of public health people advocate for the U. They're pushing for that. And standing desks. You know, you're all sitting right now. I would not be offended if you all decided to stand during lecture if it's going to help you burn more calories. maybe you're not worried about that at your age, but anyway, try to be on your feet more when you get an actual job. Just think about it. Okay, so unfortunately, roughly 50% of the population is going to be affected by cancer. And there's different cancers that are more predominant. So you have male and female, but within these groups, lung cancer is still pretty prevalent. And that's, again, because primarily of smoking. People can get lung cancer from secondhand smoke, so other people's choice to smoke affects your health, so advocate against it. Colon cancer is pretty prevalent. And let's see, leukemia, lymphoma, prostate cancer. And then, 23 makes up other cancers. You have bladder cancer, skin cancer, oral cancer. There's a lot. Okay, so looking at men. For men, 1 in 2 will get cancer in their lifetime, which is terrifying. Primarily, it's prostate cancer. And then the least likely would be stomach cancer. But for women, we actually get cancer 1 in 3, which is nice, but not really. It's still very high. So breast cancer is by far the most prevalent cancer in women, which I'm sure most of you know, because for a month you wear a pink ribbon and donate money to the cause and make people aware. And then, yeah, I'll go on from there. So lastly, I just wanted to show you the risks for tobacco. So tobacco's been a prevalent cause of lung cancer for a while. It's probably the most preventable cancer out there because people can just not smoke and not get lung cancer. But for some reason, that doesn't seem to be the case. So here you have the average consumption per capita. And around 1970, it starts to drop off because people realize that it's bad for you. But if you look at the blue curve, this is male lung cancer. So males started smoking earlier. They were the ones that thought it was cool before the women did. So you can see that they have cancer more readily than women do in this generation, or in this area, sorry. And that starts to fall off. Women started picking up cigarettes a lot later than men did, and that's why you don't see this decrease. We've plateaued at least in the rates of lung cancer, but it's not on the decline. So, 50%, that's high. That's a lot of people, okay? And the thing is it's quite preventable. I showed you all those risk factors. Those are things that you can control. It's not like, oh, well, I have the genetics for it. I'm going to get the, eating healthy, exercising, not smoking. It's that easy. And yet people still can't seem to do that. So advocate for diets against cancer, diets against obesity, diets for health. So thank you all for tolerating me over the last couple days, and I hope that you learned a lot, and I'll see you later.